Yeah, the hide
I don't
button is
see
to the right
hide.
of the red hang up button.
There is no hide
Thanks,
button.
Andrea.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I got it.
Has anyone heard from Malcolm? No? Okay, we'll give him a few more minutes to try to get in.
I just sent Malcolm a text.
Thank you, PJ.
He had trouble getting on the other day, didn't he?
I
Yes.
seem to recollect you did.
Long time no see, Nikki.
It has been like 24 hours.
Almost exactly.
Do you hear anything back, PJ?
Sorry, no response yet. It says delivered.
All right. we're at 2:05 right now. And we have 4 members present, so we have a quorum. And I know Malcolm will catch up to us.
I'm trying to get on now.
There you are.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Malcolm.
Hear you.
Just can't see you.
Well, that's probably a blessing. Yeah, this thing kept saying that I had invalid address or something. Can you see me now? I can see all of you now.
We can
Okay.
see you
You're good.
now.
Okay.
You're good.
Well,
Right.
that's painful, but okay.
We have 4 members present. That myself and 3 other members that I can see. Ms. Howe is present via telephone, and therefore I'm declaring that we have a quorum present. Additions to the agenda. I just have a quick question. I believe Ms. Wilson was going to talk. Is that still on?
Yes, she's still scheduled. This
Okay,
is Donna.
very good. We'll take Ms. Wilson as agenda item number 7 then. It has a conveniently blank space. And that's not the reason, but that makes it easy to write it in. With that, as noted on the agenda, the board is going to again meet in closed session in order to obtain legal advice. And we're at this point, we're saying that we're going to return in about 30 minutes. That's what we're trying to be a little bit more considerate to our audience and give you some sense of what we're going to do. We will not come back prior to 30 minutes. If we run over a little bit, my apologies in advance, but we're aiming for 30 minutes. With that having been said, I'm sorry, I'm smiling because Malcolm has just managed to get in, and of course now we're going to have to all get out and go over into the closed meeting, and then I'll have to get back in again. The board will now consider whether to meet in closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice and consult with staff on potential or pending litigation as permitted by Section 305, B7, and 8 of the General Provisions Article. Meeting in closed session would allow the members of the board to seek and obtain legal advice of board counsel without waiver of the attorney-client privilege. May I have a motion to meet in closed session?
So moved, PJ.
Second, Malcolm.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None. The motion having passed, the board will meet in closed session in accordance with exemptions B7 and 8 of Section 3305 of the Open Meetings Act. So for board members, we're going to, as council pointed out before, we're going to completely leave the seminar and then join back in at a later moment in about 30 minutes. And each of you should have a separate email, which provides the information to move into closed session. So with that, I will see the board members and staff in closed session as soon as I figure out how to shut this off.
Yeah, I had that problem too.
I'm just going to X the thing up in the right here and see what happens. Do you want to leave the webinar? Yes, I do.
I don't even see that. How do I get out of here?
Kelly Howells is with you?
Hi, Kelly. PJ and Andrea are on so far.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
I realize without your camera, you can't see who's on, so it's all. And then Bill just joined.
Okay, hi, Bill.
I'll give you the color play-by-play.
What are you doing out there, Kelly? Vacation?
No, my parents have sold their house, so we're going through all the boxes of personal things to get it either to the dump or to the consignment store to be sold or to take back home with us. It's 60 degrees here too, 60.
What part
Even
of
though
California?
it's noon. I'm in Central Oregon.
Oh, in Oregon.
Yeah, so we're in a mountainous region and it's much, much cooler.
Nikki, are we live yet? I just don't want anybody to say anything that.
I believe that you are.
Okay. I'm here, PJ's here, Bill's here.
Kelly is on. I think we're just waiting for Malcolm.
Okay. Thank you, PJ. While we're waiting for Malcolm, and not to in any way exclude him, but I'm contemplating asking Mayo to present, give their information first, and then engage in a general discussion of the various aspects. Any of the board members that are on have any concerns
I'm
about doing it?
on. I can hear you, and I can see you, but you can't see me for some reason.
It's true. Kind of like stealth mode of the board.
On the very top, Malcolm, there's a icon webcams, and you need to click on start sharing my webcam.
I clicked that already. So share my webcam. Okay.
Yeah. To the left of that, there's a row of things, and one of those is a webcam too. If you click on that, it's right the one below the mute button.
If it's on, it should be green.
It is green. Both of them. But I can hear you.
Okay. Well, short of having an IT tech swing by, which I don't think is going to work well. If it's okay with you, Malcolm, I'll just continue with the meeting then.
That's fine. I can hear you.
Okay, great. What I was saying was that my inclination is to ask Mayo to make their presentation. They had sent a document in to us. It's been disseminated to the board. And I know Mr. Garris wanted to speak to the board. And I'm inclined to deal with, have him do that and then move into a general discussion of our various options. Does anyone have a concern or objection to that?
It's fine.
Okay. Mr. Garris, on deck?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, you can.
Okay, floor is yours, Dave.
All right, thank you. So you've gotten our letter, correct? And the spreadsheet that we sent with it, correct?
Oh.
Yes, and it's been disseminated to the board.
Yes.
Great. Great. So, we wanted to reiterate that our plan for vote centers is a crucial step for the success of the 2020 election. Yesterday, or not yesterday, but on the 5th, when we left off, we had 3 points that Mayo proposed vote centers, allowing ballots to be opened by October 5th, which is 30 days before Election Day, roughly 30 days before Election Day, and the establishment of a data center to help the OBEs process the absentee ballot applications. We would like to see movement on these proposals at this meeting. As we put in writing, our proposals are time sensitive. Time is of the essence because we are within 90 days now of Election Day, so the window is closing to when we can effectively implement changes that we're going to successfully be able to pull off in November. In fact, Election Day really is going to start for in-person voting on the 22nd of October if we use the current date for early voting. Of course, for the vote center plan, we'd like to do 6 consecutive days from the 29th of October to November 3rd. We've met with, so following the meeting on the 5th, the directors from all 24 local boards met together. We are unified in our proposals for in-person voting at vote centers to clarify and to show the reasoning and the logic behind the vote centers. We prepared a report which lists voting locations by LBE. Again, you have a copy of that. Roughly what we're proposing is to double the number of vote centers, double the number of early voting sites in each county to become the number of vote centers. We also got feedback from each director to specifically tailor the requested number of sites to what is appropriate for the county based on the geography and the location of the population. So the sheet that you received has the specific requirements for each county. That said, if I may, I'd like to invite Guy Mickley, the director of Howard County, to speak. He has feedback regarding the pros of vote centers as opposed to consolidation, and he would like to take the floor. If I may.
That'd be fine.
Guy, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Great. So good afternoon, State Board members. My name is Guy Mickley. I'm the Director of Elections in Howard County. I've been doing elections for 25 years, and I do have a rather deep voice that carries, and sometimes it may sound like I'm yelling, but I'm really not. So yes, Dave's right. I'd like to do a comparison of vote centers versus consolidations. So vote centers and consolidations are mitigation strategies for a local board to successfully conduct an election with a smaller than usual judge pool. Judge recruitment is a revolving door right now. We gain judges and we're losing the judges almost as quickly as we gain them. We would not be having any of these conversations if the problem was not real and tangible. The problem can simply not be ignored. If nothing is done and we must staff early vote centers and full polling places on election day, there will be process breakdowns, polls that will not open, and polls that do not have enough judges to effectively run an election. We are essentially running two separate elections at once, a vote by mail election and a regular election. We do not have the ability to double or triple the amount of staff members that we currently employ. Being able to shrink numbers of judges and voters down into vote centers will be a tremendous step in the right direction to enable the local election board continue down a path of success. Please note, all the information that I'm going to be presenting is tied to the Mayo election plan submitted to the state board. That includes the vote centers in all counties from October 29th through November 3rd, and the election directors from all 24 local boards of elections support this plan in full. So will consolidations work? Yes. Will vote centers work? Yes, but better. Here's the reasons why. Number one, less judges overall to conduct the election. For example, in Howard County, under the Mayo plan, if there were 8 vote centers open for voting across this time frame, I would need 1,200 judges to be assigned. Under the current proposed consolidation plan that I am presenting, for 8 days of early voting and consolidation of polling places on election day, I would need to fill 1,600 slots for judges. Doing nothing would result in 2,100 slots that need to be filled. The numbers will go up and down for each county depending on size for all 3 of those categories, but the end results will all be the same. Currently, Howard County has 562 people that have affirmed as of today they will work the polls on election day, and just under 200 that have affirmed they will work early voting. At this point in the process, the less judge assignments that we have to fill, the better chance we have of success. Number 2, less judges means less election judge training, and vote centers mean only one kind of training for each judge. By far, the most labor-intensive, time-consuming process that we execute is judge training from year to year. Now, this year with the onslaught of applications that we're going to receive, that may change a little bit, but they'll be generally the same. By having less judge training, we have the ability to conduct smaller training classes to comply with COVID-19 guidelines if we have in-person training. If we were to have virtual training classes, we could have smaller sizes, which would provide the judges with a greater ability to ask questions and keep the classes to the certain time frame that we've allotted. Under the consolidation plan, judges that were willing to work both election day and early voting would have 2 different types of training because of the nuances and procedures between early voting and election day. We would have no choice but to put the judges into multiple rooms to train them in person under the COVID-19 guidelines, unless we found facilities large enough to hold regular size for me, 25 to 50 people in a training class. They would almost have to be double the amount of training classes that we would have, as each judge that worked early voting would have a separate class. Virtual training would become very cumbersome, as more people we would have to add to each class would create elongated question and answer periods. The end result of more training classes is the inability to work on mail-in ballot applications and ballots, meaning a delay in voters receiving ballots, a delay in the local boards processing return ballots, and a delay in canvass beginning. The consequence of this would be results from the vote-by-mail ballots would not be available for some time well after the election. Number 3, less sites equals more process advantages both in the polling place and in the office. The first part of this, with less sites to staff, the ability to correctly staff a site increases. Under COVID-19 voting guidelines, you must have sufficient workers to not only run the election, but to clean the equipment, tables, and protective barriers to direct voters throughout larger rooms and facilities, and facilitate the PPE process for every voter that enters the installation. If we spread the judges too thin to open more sites, we will not have the ability to clean effectively, process voters in a timely manner, or simply run a polling place effectively or efficiently under current conditions. Second thing, less sites mean that a local staff can give centralized real-time support from employees to individual vote centers. If we have consolidated precincts, we can assign our employees to oversee multiple polling places. For me, that would mean one employee would be looking at and helping out 4 to 6 polling places at any one time. Under the vote center scheme, we can give one-on-one support to the vote center for immediate assistance with line management, voter questions, judge concerns, any other area of the process that there might be a question about. This strategy produces an immediate positive impact on the voter experience in the center. Number 3, less time spent doing logic and accuracy testing, meaning there's less equipment to test, less time spent packing judge supplies, and less time conducting the aforementioned judge training results in more time for the local board staff to work on processing mail-in applications, processing returned ballots to ready for canvass, and actually perform canvass of ballots to provide the public and candidates results earlier than currently anticipated. The fourth major point, voters can go to any polling place in their county to get a regular ballot. Under the current consolidation strategy that I was proposing, a voter would have to go to the current consolidation or the correct consolidation to vote a regular ballot. If they show up at the wrong site, they would have to vote a provisional ballot or go to the correct consolidation. Under the vote center strategy, a voter can go to any vote center in the county and receive a regular ballot. Provisional ballots would be used less frequently. Vote centers would be inherently less confusing for voters in this time of constant change from election to election. In Howard County, Baltimore City, and Baltimore County, this will be the 4th election held in 2020 and the 4th time the election will have been conducted differently. Too much change in too little time causes voter confusion and will have many unintended consequences. 5, there will be a cost savings by using vote centers. In this time of uncertainty, where of not knowing where the money is coming from to conduct processes in government, this would allow us to be more fiscally responsible. Less PPE would have to be required for the amount of election judges and vote centers that we'll be utilizing when compared to any other plan. By not consolidating precincts, we would no longer have to send out voter notification cards to every voter that has a new precinct, which would cost us not only money in printing, but also human resources as we send out thousands of cards. It's a lengthy, time-consuming process if it's done in-house by a local board. And if you outsource it, the price to do this goes way up. Less judges utilized means less money coming out of the local board budget. Some of the money that previously would have been devoted to judges could be moved to cover other expenses in the election process as we conduct 2 different types of elections at once. Number 6, change voting hours to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for every day of the cycle in our plan. This will allow for 10 additional hours of voting over the current schematic of voting in the plan, while making all voting hours the same for each day of the 6-day process. After consultation with every election director, Mayor proposes establishing the vote centers in each jurisdiction as listed on the attached spreadsheet that Dave mentioned before. We propose to create roughly double, it's actually a little more than double, the number of vote centers as compared to the existing early voting sites, which includes feedback and adjustments from the local boards as necessary for each particular jurisdiction. On the turnout estimates, we are going to establish 162 vote centers statewide, and those vote centers would serve approximately an average of 1,767 voters per site per day over the course of 6 days. Local election officials are some of the most hardworking, intelligent, and savvy people you'll find in a workplace. We always do our best to pivot, think outside the box, and find resolution to difficult problems that we might face, and constantly try to mitigate circumstances before they become reality. We are the experts. But we need a clear path to success. Consolidation certainly will help us, but vote centers will afford us all of the aforementioned advantages to allow us to maximize our time and provide the level of customer service that the voters of Maryland deserve and have become accustomed to over the years. Thank you.
And don't go away. Dave, is that the presentation you want to make at this point? Was on open it up for
Yes.
Okay. Board members, questions, comments for David there? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is PJ Hogan. I want to make sure I understand this. You're proposing 162, I know it's all nomenclature, vote centers. These would be open, you're proposing 6 days, October 29th through November 3rd. What about on election day? Are there more sites?
The plan would continue. It would be the same 162 sites for all 6 days. Currently in early voting, I believe you have 79 sites for 8 days. We would be giving you twice as many sites for the 5 days and then the same amount of sites on election day, which would actually be equivalent to or more than the number of voter site days that we would have in the plan as it is today.
If you look at the sheet that we sent you, we are predicting 85% turnout statewide for the presidential election, which would be higher than any previous presidential election in Maryland history. We predict 50% by mail and then 50% in person, using the sites as we've listed by county.
I mean, maybe my memory is failing me, but 2 days ago, I proffered the idea of using all the public high schools in the state, which is 282. And I think there was a lot of people saying, yes, that'll work. We could staff that. That's a lot. 162 is a lot less.
We've talked with our colleagues. We talked about it in depth. So this proposal does not come lightly. For instance, in Baltimore City, you'd be looking at 46 public high schools. In many cases, and in many of the large jurisdictions, the high schools are not going to be available for us for a period of days. They'll be available for us for Election Day. However, the Board of Educations in the various jurisdictions are indicating that they're not going to let us take their buildings for multiple days to use for voting. So that puts us in a position where we feel we can open the number of sites that each county has indicated. Every county has said that they can open these sites, and they just need the flexibility to place them where locations are available, where buildings are available, and where population centers are. This is another aspect that came up, is that some high schools are clustered or built very near each other, making it kind of an overlap as far as the sites being distributed efficiently. So we're looking for flexibility on the local level in the placement of the vote center locations.
Let me ask, if I may, this is Mike. If I may ask a question, you indicated that you think 50% of the voting this year will be by mail-in ballot and 50% will be in person. You're also predicting a high turnout. Historically, how many of a given group of 100 voters, let's say 50 of them are going to vote by mail, of the other 50, how many of them will vote in early voting and how many of them will vote on election day, historically?
This is Nikki. I can answer that initially, and then if David or Guy want to supplement it. So on average statewide, it's about 30% of voters vote during early and the rest vote on election day. Now, it varies significantly by county. So some of our smaller rural counties, it's maybe 10, 15%. Whereas I believe Talbot is approaching 40, 45%. So there's great variability among the counties, but statewide average is about 30-odd%, low 30s.
That's 30% of all votes.
No, that's 30% of people that show up. 30% of voters who participate during early voting. So it's 30% of total turnout.
I'd like to chime in.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that question compares. I think that question compares apples and oranges. This isn't a normal year. Nothing about it is normal. With absentee or mail-in ballots, whatever you want to call them at this point, vote by mail. Just in my county, I'm already up to 17,000 applications before the applications are mailed out to voters. I heard today the Montgomery County is already up to 70,000, which is more than they've ever had in any election. The numbers are telling us that you're going to get that 50% vote by mail. The numbers aren't lying to us right now. So we have to keep in mind that this is not a normal election. So any number from any other election really doesn't matter right now. What matters is the road to success in front of us. And we need to focus on what we can do to mitigate any problems that may arise. And we've given you a plan.
I have a question there. I just ran some raw numbers as an example. In Anne Arundel County, which I'm most familiar with, if you have 50% that are going to turn out in person, probably half of them are going to turn out on election day, the other half in the days leading up. And I did some rough math, and you're right around 6,000 that you'd have to process, which would mean you'd have to do, if they came in that vote center, because there's 14, you're proposing 14 vote centers. If they came in throughout the day, which they won't, they'll come in early in the morning, they'll come in at lunch, and they'll come in the evening. But if you spaced them throughout the day, you'd have to process 8 per minute. Is that, isn't that like not possible?
Given the number of check-in stations that we could run, I think that's realistic. It's in the ballpark. Because it's 8 per minute spread over a staff of 10 poll books per site. Given that we're going to get our biggest buildings available and load them up with equipment and enough equipment and enough election judges so that we can social distance while running efficiently and running at a high volume.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that I think this is where voter education comes in. We can promote the fact that you have 6 election days. It's not an early voting period, and then it stops, and then it's another election day. You have 6 continuous days of voting. Go to one of them. Don't wait till the end to stand in line. By all means, let me be quite frank with you. There's never been an election where someone didn't stand in line. That's not going to change. Someone's going to end up standing in line somewhere. It's going to happen. It's a fact of life. We're just trying to mitigate it the best way possible.
So I have a question, not exactly at your plane, if I may. So we don't have the authority, I think to do the things you've requested here, and I support in general the idea of this plan. I would want a few more vote centers than you have, but I do not believe that we have. Well, we definitely do not have the authority to do it. I don't believe that we're going to get that authority from the governor. So if we don't, and we're working on consolidations, would you consolidate to less, or would you stick with your current plans of consolidation?
If I may speak for Anne Arundel County, we would keep our current level of consolidation. So our board approved 105 locations to use 105 locations on August 4th. So a couple days ago, we would keep that consolidation. We would not consolidate any further. To do so would be extremely dangerous. In terms of voter confusion, voter lines, snarls in the parking lots of our voting sites. It would be it would be taking that too far to consolidate that much.
So is your sense, Mr. Gary, that the other counties would feel the same, or that they would further consolidate?
I believe they would feel the same, because before we got to this point, they were working on how they would consolidate. And Guy, if you'd like to interject.
Well, sure. I mean, I haven't seen another plan. So if there's another plan out there, I probably would like to hear it. But going back to what Mr. Volk was saying about the fact that you don't have the authority. Well, I believe Martin Luther King Jr. said you can't see the staircase unless you take the first step. What would hurt in saying, this looks like a plan that would be viable, send it to the governor. We've done every explanation I think that would be necessary at that point. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no.
Well, this is PJ Hogan. If I may, on that, I hear you, but you in one of your comments, you said time is of the essence. So if we proffer such a plan to the governor says that a couple days go by, he says no, we've got to reconvene, come up with another plan, and then hope that one is acceptable. You're talking week by week by week. This needs to be finalized as soon as possible.
Sure, and I think the local boards have a consolidation plan or strategy available. I had mine on the agenda on Wednesday. I know a bunch of other jurisdictions did also. At that point, we really just need to hit a button, inform voters, do a whole bunch of IT work to make sure that Our polling place locators are accurate. So we have a plan that's, in our mind, a backup plan at this point, because we really do feel that this plan gives us our best chance at success. So if you guys were to meet next week and approve the consolidations, if the governor did indeed say no to what we're asking, we're just losing that couple days. We already have another plan of action, unless there's some other plan.
I think what is, let me note two things. Number one, as I understand it, the way that you've laid it out with 162 vote centers, that historically we would have 70% of our in-person voters on election day. Did I get that right? 35%, 30%, something like that on early voting. The remainder the other half of the voters total would be, you believe, mail-in voters.
It would be 70%, 70% of 50% of 85%. So remember, every time you do this, you're cutting down another percentage. So you're not dealing with a whole number times 70%. You're dealing with 50%.
What you're basically dealing with is 1/3 of the voters in Maryland on election day would be going, this is people actually voting, not the ones who don't vote, that on election day, 1/3 of all the voters in Maryland would be going to 162 sites. And I find that daunting. It just seems like it's a big funnel, but it doesn't have a wide spout to it. And don't get me wrong on this. I like the presentation you made. I like the points that you made. I have that concern about, are we going to have this wave on election day where it's going to funnel into 162 sites with 1/3 of the people actually who are voting in Maryland are going to go on that day. But that's a concern that could be both debated and worked on. But you are aware, as we all are aware, that after our last meeting and prior to this one, so we're talking about a span of 48 hours, the governor sent a letter to the administrator. And in that letter, he indicated that the state board has the authority and responsibility under state law to conduct an election. He gave no indication whatsoever in that letter, and this is after we discussed very many of the same issues. It was clear where the board was going. At no time in his letter did he indicate that he was going to use his emergency powers to allow us to establish 162 voting centers. And there's nothing that's happened since he wrote this letter till now that causes me to believe that he will change that. Now, could he make a decision? Again, you had a terrific presentation. You've got great data here. And could the governor look at that and say, actually, I think that may be a great way to go, or we can merge that with some other ideas, and he may come back and tell us that. But he hasn't told us that today. And I'm concerned that we are just going to say, gosh, Governor, we did receive your letter, 24 hours ago, but we're going to send you the same thing we were talking about anyway. I don't see that as productive. Again, the governor may well, on the basis of your presentation and having been in roles of positions of authority, I'm aware that way beyond what people think, persons in positions, and I'm sure many of the people listening to this and watching it and people that are involved in this, know that information flows, and the governor may be receiving a flow of information. Part of it may be your presentation, and he will say, I think I like trying to move in this direction, but he hasn't said it today. And so for today, what we're looking at is what we can do under our authority. And what we can do under our authority is consolidate precincts and run early voting centers. And we can do whatever, and this includes PJ's concept of the using the high schools as voting locations. And we can convert the voting centers to election day voting locations. And we can encourage the local boards to maximize the number of locations that they can support. If a local board believes, and Mr. Velp was talking about the Anne Arundel concepts that Anne Arundel and Mr. Garris, you were also in that conversation, that it would be larger than the number of high schools plus early voting centers. And if that's what you can support, we're fine with that. I believe we're fine with it. But what you're asking us to do is to do something that's already been looked at and which we have received no indication that we will be given the authority to do it. My preference is to work with what I have the authority to do. I will tell you that the information that's presented today, I know that you sent this to the governor. I'm confident the governor and staff have looked at what you sent. I have little doubt that a representative of the governor is watching our meeting today and listened to your presentation. It's a compelling presentation, but we have no authority to enact it. And if we were working on a blank slate, I would say, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's send it up. But we're not working on a blank slate because we received a letter less than 24 hours ago, which said nothing about using voting centers in the sense that you're discussing it. So my concern, I have some concern about the numbers, but I have a substantial concern about the fact that we do not have the authority to do what you want us to do. And what you want us to do is to send this to the governor in the face of a letter that he's already delivered to us. And I don't see that as productive. What I see as productive is moving on what we can do and passing information on. And like I said, people in positions of authority, and the greater they are, the positions are, the more information flows into them. And it may be that there will be a decision by the governor to, because of changed circumstances, because of his perception, because of your presentation, that we should do something different. But we don't have it today. And today, what we have is a concept of consolidation. We have the authority to do this, and we can, and this is a big we, all of us involved in the elections community can make this work. That's my thoughts, and I'll defer to my colleagues for their further take on any of this. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, this is PJ. I want to say this and get a reaction from somebody. What I would feel more comfortable with is all of the current early voting centers that exist that we have right now. I don't know what that number is, whether it's 90 or whatever. having those operate for 6 days, 7 days, 8 days. I don't know if that matters, but at least 6 days. And then on election day, using the words, consolidating the precincts into the 282 high schools around the state. As an example, I'm looking at Baltimore City, which I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, but historically, Baltimore City has had the biggest problem getting judges. I think we probably all would agree with that. To staff, somebody said they have 44 high schools in Baltimore City. They normally have 296 precincts. 44 high schools is 14%. Okay? To staff those 296 precincts, they need 3,300 judges. They right now, according to the data I have, they have 777 judges, which is 23% of what they need. So they've got a higher percentage of judges than the percentage of locations under what I would propose. I think that would be acceptable to a lot of entities.
I would, in the same vein as Mr. Hogan, I would also note that if a particular jurisdiction, a county or the city, felt they wanted to do more than that, could do more than that, we would, I find it difficult to believe that we would stand in their way. So in many ways, I look at this as more of a floor than a ceiling, this particular idea. You're certainly, anytime that the local board believes they can and need to exceed what we're talking about, they certainly have my support. So I think that correlates with what Mr. Hogan was saying.
I would like, if I can, Chairman Cogan, I would see if Mr. Garris could speak a little more, or Mr. Mickley, either one, onto why over consolidating, if you're just moving precincts, exactly why that is a problem versus vote center. So it's this maybe a similar amount of voters, but why? What's the pushback on having some number more than listed here, but further consolidating? What's the problem?
If I may, I'll answer that question. And I'll relate it right back to our plan because I still think it's our best option. So I believe in Montgomery County, I think what was just floated was we would have early voting, 8 days of early voting, and then we would have election day, which would be in the high schools plus the early voting centers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll give you a couple statistics because I've actually been sitting here doing them. Under the plan that you just floated, there would be 130 voter site days under the plan you presented, meaning Montgomery County has 11 early voting sites. They have 8 days of early voting. So that's 88 voter opportunity days for a voter to go vote. With the 31 high schools that they have, plus the 11 early voting sites, that would be 42 for a total of 130. Under our plan, there's 132 voter opportunity days.
I still, yeah, if somebody could, I'd like, again, the exact answer wasn't not necessarily why one is better than the other, but Mr. Garris had said we would stick with our 105 and work on staffing them. Why is that better in consolidation, and why wouldn't you want to go to larger and lesser? I just want to have everybody understand the reasoning behind them.
If you go to consolidation as opposed to vote centers, you're tying the voters to a specific location, which means we have to notify the voters to make sure they go to the correct place to vote. If they go to the wrong place, then they've got to vote by provisional ballot. If you start consolidating the entire counties at a time, people are going to get very confused about where they go. So that's a major problem. Whereas with vote centers, you don't have to worry about that because anyone can go vote anywhere that there's voting open. So that flexibility is the key. If you tie people into it, you're tying them into a location. So when you tie the people into the location, that's also going to increase the voters. That's also going to increase the lines that you see there because voters have no other option but to go to that particular high school. If there's a long line, if the parking lot is so jammed that there's no parking spaces, they can't go to the other high school that's, 5 miles down the road that's not busy at all. They got to stay where they were assigned. Otherwise, they can't vote because those are the ballot styles that they would need to vote at their assigned polling place wouldn't be at the other location. So that's why those are two really important reasons why consolidation and vote centers are two very, very different animals. They look very similar, but they're very different. It's the difference between a house cat and a tiger. If you continue on that with regards to vote centers, like I said, the parking lots, because you can't move, because you don't have that flexibility of voting in other places, they'll get overrun. If you have a parking lot that has 1,000 spaces, but you take, in Anne Arundel County, we have 15 high schools plus the 7 early voting sites. So that's 22 locations for, half of the people that we're going to vote. You're basically saying that it's not 6,000 people that location needs to process. It's going to be something like 15,000 people that location needs to process. So if you were concerned about the voters per location, that number just went way higher. Sorry that might sound flippant, but that number went way higher. And if you're also concerned about the number of voters per minute, that's also going to go up by a pretty substantial margin, probably more than 10. And just as a note, the physical capacity of the routers that we use is 10 electronic poll books. So that's kind of the ceiling for electronic poll books that can be attached to one router. So those are a couple of the major reasons that make vote centers more appealing than consolidations and put some real risks to consolidating too much.
One other question. I'm sorry, Mr. Hogan.
Okay.
For a vote center, you have 195 different ballot styles. What were you doing to ensure that the right ballot style goes to the right voter?
That's a training issue with our election judges. We're going to use the person who issues it is going to be checked by the person who assigns the privacy booth. So as you enter the polling place, you get your voter authority card, you give that to the person at the ballot table, they give you the correct ballot style, and then from the ballot table, you move over to get in line for a privacy booth, and that person that puts you at the privacy booth checks the VAC and the ballot before you are left alone to vote for your selections.
Right, and if I can add to what David just said, we've been performing early voting, doing this same exact thing for many years. They've always had all the ballot styles there. We performed it very eloquently.
Mr. Chairman, this is PJ. I heard you, David, on the ballot styles, and it would cause provisional ballots or somebody to be directed somewhere else. So maybe I just misstated. Why couldn't we have 90 early voting centers with all the ballot styles in that respective county, and then on election day, 282 vote centers with all the ballot styles of that respective county.
That's what we want. We want to have the vote centers, because the vote center will have all of the ballot styles for all of the voters, jurisdiction wide. So anyone can go vote anywhere. Essentially, it's taking the early voting format and just applying it to election day.
I'm in a full agreement on that. I think where we disagree is on the numbers.
Well, also, we don't have the authority to do that. We can't create vote centers on our own.
But the governor can, by suspending the statute under emergency, and then we could create them. Is that correct or not? I asked our AG.
We don't have the authority to do it today.
It's going to require some action by the governor. Exactly what that looks like, I think we need to work through. But either pursuant to his authority under Section 8103, which is to specify alternate voting locations in a way that then conforms, permits vote centers as opposed to precinct-based voting, or a combination of that authority plus the alternate voting system authority, plus or minus suspension of specific statutes that contemplate precinct-based voting, require the use of provisional ballots for voters whose names don't appear on the register for that election district, and so on. It could be a hodgepodge of different things, but it would require some action by the governor.
But along those lines that both Mr. Hogan and Mr. Vault have been talking about, Guy or Dave, if we were today to direct the counties to implement guidance that they should look at consolidation at the using what we've talked about here, the high schools plus the early voting centers as consolidated voting locations on election day. And beyond that, to whatever upper number they believe that their particular jurisdiction can handle. If we gave that guidance today and the jurisdictions gave us that back, and if at some point in the future, and I don't mean the distant future, I'm obviously talking a relatively short period. As I said, your presentations and your arguments are very persuasive. If we then had indicated to us that we would be given the authority to do this, would we lose any time? Because we'd still be looking at maximizing the number of voting locations. Even if we're going to use them as voting centers, I think we would want to maximize the number of voting locations. The last thing this board, I think, certainly historically, that we want to do is thwart the ability of people to get to voting locations. So the more we have, the better off we are. But if we then said, okay, we're going to switch this over to a voting center, we're going to switch them all to voting centers. Tell me what the effect would be of that. Don't assume we're doing this like October, 22nd or something. I'm saying in a relatively short time period. We issue the guidance directive today for consolidation, and we find later that it may be that we will be able to use voting center. Then what's the effect on you? What's the effect on the locals?
One of the issues is going to be voter notification, because one of the requirements we had for when we consolidate, if you approve consolidation, the LBEs are going to have to start notifying the voters by mailing them VNCs that say you're required to go vote at, Smith High School. If
Let
we
me
set
interrupt you
that, then the vote centers are approved, then we've got to re-notify everybody saying that you can go vote anywhere now. So our messaging is going to get muddled if we send too many messages out. The people are going to get confused. So that's one right off the bat.
Okay, let me interrupt you there and ask a question.
Sure.
At what point would you be sending out the notices to the voters of the election sites?
Within 30 days of approval.
Say again?
We're required to do it within 30 days of approval.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead. I think you had other items that you wanted to, that were in your mind that you wanted to raise.
So one thing with this at the SBE level is going to be the ballot order, because the way we're going to order ballots is going to depend on whether or not we're doing the way we're going to do our allocation formula is going to change whether or not you do it by vote center or by consolidation, because again, they're two different animals. Are you going to order for everybody getting flexibility, or are you going to order for specific people going to a specific location?
When do you make that decision?
I might have to defer this to Nikki or Natasha if they're on, but ballot orders are going to have to go out pretty soon. I'm fairly certain. It's something that we're kind of, the vendor is going to need time to produce the ballots. So I assume within August.
This is Donna.
Yes.
I would estimate the last week of August is when the ballot is finalized.
Okay. So any decision like this would have to be made by that time.
Yeah, at that point, you're going to start affecting the vendors who are going to be actually giving you the materials for the voting process.
Okay. What other items? What other matters?
It'll affect the election judges and the election judge training. Many of the large jurisdictions are going to start training by mid-August. I know we are, Montgomery is, Prince George's, I believe, was in that boat too. It's also going to affect the allocation of equipment. Also, it's going to depend on the site surveys that we're going to send out. Every location, the LBEs review every location prior to the election to make sure the room layouts make sense. So if we're laying it out based on consolidation, which might include 10,000 people, or if we're laying it out for a vote center, which it might change how the room is laid out. So we need time to do that, also to allocate the materials and conduct network testing. As you're probably aware, all of the metro counties are going to be connected to the single point routers this year. So making sure that all of our locations in the metro area are connecting to that VPN network prior to election day is a pretty important task. And we'll need time to do that. So
what I take from this is that we have, excuse me, we have, by mid to late, if there was going to be voting centers, we would have to get that out by mid to late August. Does that sound about right?
Mid-August preferably, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Thoughts, comments, questions for our speakers? Hearing none. Dave, Guy, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Mr. Chairman, I am very sorry.
Yeah, sure.
David, you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
I don't want to muddy the waters, but we've not talked about drop-off boxes at all. I mean, what are the LBEs thinking as far as drop-off boxes available?
That's a great question. I believe if we went to the vote center option, the LBEs will have at least one drop box at every vote center. We'll have drop boxes throughout all the jurisdictions.
How many drop boxes, maybe a question for Nikki, how many drop boxes did we have for the June 2nd election statewide?
I don't, give me 1 second, I'll look it up. Unless
I believe the number was 63.
Is there a plan to have more than 63 for the general election?
There has been an additional 40 or 45 that have been ordered.
Okay, so that's 108 drop boxes.
So PJ, we had 75 for the primary. Sorry, Donna. It was 75.
Good.
75
No, plus-
now plus 45.
Yeah.
So 120. Okay, because I want to make sure that I see people voting multiple ways. They get their ballot, they mail it in, they get their ballot, they drop it in a drop box, an official drop box. They get their ballot, they drop it off at a vote center, or they go to the vote center and vote, or we saw it in June 2nd. Some people showed up at vote centers with a filled out ballot. But I thought the drop boxes were a big hit. And given all the news and noise about the Postal Service, I wanted to see drop boxes used as much as possible. So, okay, I just wanted to raise the drop box issue. And then when we don't need to decide now, but we should know, like, when are the drop boxes going to be installed and operational? But that obviously doesn't need to be decided right away.
Anyone else have anything? I do have one thing. It doesn't, it fits with this, but it's not, it fits with this. And this is the matter of election judges. And first, I'm talking with the local boards. I'm seeing anecdotal, and I don't really trust anecdotal, because when we find out more details, we find that didn't happen the way it sounded. But I've seen some things that say people volunteered and they were told, call us back in August and that sort of thing. And I heard it and I looked at it and I thought, well, that's what they're going to do, the training. So what I would encourage the local boards is when somebody surfaces as a volunteer, thank them and then grab their phone number and their email or whatever is necessary and let them know that we're back in touch because training is set for later on. I think people are seeing it as just a little bit too, they feel that they've been slighted, if you will, and that it wasn't really serious. And now I speak to many, many people throughout Maryland. I wish it was a TV show. Election judges are crucial to the ability of the democracy to run elections. And if you are a person, if you were ever a judge, but you feel you can't be a judge in this election, what I would ask you is that you make it your mission to recruit someone who can be a judge. Talk it up. Encourage people. the satisfaction can be tremendous. People who have worked there and frequently will come back year after year. It is an amazing experience to participate like this. But we need election judges. If you think that you haven't, that you've volunteered and you don't think that you've been accepted, I would encourage you to call the local board and say, hey, did you guys really want me to be a judge? And if they say, we don't know, call the state board. Tell us who you talked to. Tell us when you called. Don't just go on some social media and say, hey, I had a bad experience. Call us. Tell us. Because we want you as an election judge. So with that, does anyone else have anything on this particular discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if where are we as a board? Are we, I feel like we're leaving this discussion, and are we going to direct what we have now, direct our local boards to go back and come back with their final and best based on what we heard from leadership today? Or do we have the wherewithal to vote for either the Mayo Plan or something similar to that, to present that to the governor simultaneously to trying to come up with this other thing? I'm just wondering from my other colleagues where they would stand on that.
I'm just going to excuse the speakers. And
before they leave, could I ask them a question?
Absolutely.
This is an entirely different situation. We've never experienced it before. I'm listening to all of the data and statistics and proposals of what happens or what has happened, what's proposed by percentage of voters, early voters, day of election. And I really can't see how any of that has to play, because we're in a situation we've never been in for 100 years. So trying to take a situation that has existed in the past under, quote, normal circumstances and try and put it in context of what we have today, I find it very difficult to comprehend. And what I would like to know is this. We are under time constraints, and we're also under option restraints. There are very few options left for us to do. And I guess my question is, once we come up with a proposal or with the options within the framework that we've been given to work with, is Mayo and the local boards willing to work and do everything possible to make it work and go forward from that point on, or will they come back and try and come up with another proposal?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayo has given you the proposal. This is the proposal with the unanimous backing of all of the local boards of elections. So what we've given you is what we're confident is the best possible solution to conduct this election. Following our plan, we think that the voters in Maryland will have a hassle-free, convenient voting experience in November. So this is our proposal. If we have to do it a different way, then as we said in the last letter that we gave you, the staff of the local boards are innovative, outside the box thinkers, and we will find the best possible way to get it done. No one wants anyone to have a bad experience on election day. No one in the election community wants to see anyone disenfranchised or not have the opportunity to cast their ballot. So we'll do everything humanly possible to make that happen. However, we have given you our plan to make that happen in the best possible way that we know how.
Okay, I thank you for that, and I appreciate that. And we realize that you guys have experience, and we need to look at that. But sometimes we may want to agree with something, but our hands may be tied to a certain extent as well. And the main thing is that we all work together to make sure that it's a process that everyone has the opportunity to vote, and nobody is disenfranchised or marginalized in that point. And hopefully we can all work together, and we'll have as error-free election as possible. But I think it's something we've never experienced before. I don't think any other board has addressed this. So bear with us as we bear with you, and we thank you. Well, at least I do anyway. I don't know about the rest of them.
I'm sure we all do.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else have anything for the speakers? All right. Dave, Guy, thank you very much. Okay, with that, the question for us is where we proceed at this time. Does anyone want to offer any comments at this point? Are we ready to put a motion on to the floor?
Mr. Chairman, this is PJ. I mean, I'm prepared to put a motion on the floor, and because I think as we've laid out, what we want to do probably is we're going to require the governor to take some action for us then to implement that action, and for the locals to implement that action. And time being of the essence, I'd like to get the ball moving.
So are you suggesting then that we direct and provide guidance to the local boards to consolidate the high schools and the early voting centers?
I guess my problem is either my misunderstanding of the word consolidate or just the misuse of consolidate. As I understand it, consolidation would cause people to have to go to specific locations.
That's
and
correct.
Under the guise of trying to make this election, under these circumstances, as easy and pain-free and simple as possible, instead of the word consolidation, I guess I want to use the word vote centers. I want to recommend that, and I'm open to the number of days, but just for the sake of argument, for the October 29th through the 3rd, through November 3rd, the early voting centers that are already in place, that they be open as vote centers. And then on election day, the 282 high schools, to the extent possible, and I'll explain that in 1 second, be used as vote centers in the respective counties. What I meant by to the extent possible, there may be situations where a site other than a high school is actually a better site. I'll give a real world example. Blair High School in Silver Spring is not the best site for that area. It is right on 495. A better site is the Silver Spring Civic Center. Just as large, if not larger. So I'd like to give the locals a little bit of flexibility there. When it was brought up that there are 44 high schools in Baltimore City, I didn't realize that, but I think that's great. Again, not to point fingers, but historically, there have been more lines in Baltimore City than some other places, and hopefully that would address that. And then obviously there's a lot of detail, but as I said, with the Dropbox, the maximum number of Dropboxes that we can deploy and that they're out, placed early, the way we ran it on June 2nd. And I'd like to give that plan, if this board is so inclined to adopt that plan, then we make the request to the governor to take the action necessary to implement the plan. And he's either not going to do it or he's going to do it. If he's not going to do it, I don't want to say we're back to square one, but then we've got to come up with a different plan. But I think we're giving him a plan that has a significant amount of vote centers, significant amount of vote days, all these different kind of points that were made. It's doable, and it tells the locals exactly the numbers needed, and they can get on the stick and start recruiting more judges and training the judges. And we reiterate to the governor, please give us more help. I know he's recruited about 1,000 judges from state employees. There was the letter that we received that's going out to all of the higher ed institutions to try to encourage students to volunteer as judges. But getting judges is going to be an ongoing process, I think, for a while.
I'd like to speak to this concept as well. I like the idea of having vote centers on election day. That way, you can handle a larger group of voters, and we have to do a good educational program to inform them that it's no longer precinct voting, but you go to give them the location of their vote center, and the information in the ballot will be available there that they would need. And the number of open days, and with the number of drop boxes, and perhaps we can reach as many voters as possible. I know it's going to take a lot of work and training with the election judges. And I have heard from different people that have been election judges here in this county said they would not be this year. And then there's some that said they thought they would try it, and then they had second thoughts as they looked to see the increase in infections going up. And I think we have to take that in consideration. Everything that's happening now, we have to think outside the box, have to think differently than what we have in the past. So maybe we have to create something entirely new that we haven't thought of before. And the whole idea of vote centers on election day is a novel idea. And hopefully it will work. It should work. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm happy to throw my 2 cents in. Sometimes I feel like that's what it's worth. I in general agree with the Mayo plan. I agree with both of my colleagues. I believe in vote centers for this election. I'm not sure that the governor will allow them, but I do think we should formally ask for them. And I believe I had five points to this, some of which I think are within our power, one of which we already did, which was changing the date of the vote by mail date. We did that already, I believe. Moving the canvass date to allow the locals to canvass 30 days before. Opening a central processing center to deal with the mailed applications to take that pressure off the LBEs. To have voting, I would propose something like up to from 10:27 to 11:03. That gives us the flexibility to make it 10:29 to 11:03 if that's legally allowed. And then giving us the discretion after really looking at the numbers and the voting. And then the vote centers, I like PJ's idea of the early voting sites. And then, especially because the high schools, a lot of them aren't going to be available for all of early voting. But so then we would add them on, or what is most practicable, adding that on for election day. And I would support sending that to the governor and let him tell us no. So I agree with both of my esteemed colleagues.
That's worth more than 2 cents.
Just being called steam is worth more than 2 cents, Bill.
Ms. Howell, are you there? I haven't heard from you for a while.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just quiet.
Okay.
I just want to clarify on PJ's plan for the high schools. The vote centers would be open for 6 days, right through election day. And on election day, the high schools would open also, but they would not open as consolidated polling places. They would open as vote centers so that anybody could vote there. And we would instruct the local boards that they have to open whatever the number is of high schools that they have. Let's say a county has 10 high schools. They have to at least open 10 vote centers on election day, but they don't necessarily have to be the high schools. They could be 9 high schools in 1 civic center or 8 high schools in 2 civic centers. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes,
Okay.
that's how I feel about it. Yep.
I just passed my cognitive test then. Just trying to understand this. It's so many details, but I do support Mayo's plan. It makes a lot of sense. But I also understand the governor's concern about election day itself and having enough locations for people to vote. So this seems to be a good proposal. My only question is, what do we do if the governor turns us down?
Then we move on our own authority to consolidate.
All right. And we just have a much more complicated election where we have to train election judges differently. Some trained to operate vote centers, others trained to operate consolidated polling places, et cetera, et cetera.
To some degree, yes. Yes.
Okay.
But there's basically 3 ways you can go on this. You can go with traditional election, you can go with a hybrid of consolidated, or you can go with voting centers. And that's your only 3 choices. You can pick away at a few things and change a couple of details around, but essentially you have 3 choices. Open every precinct, consolidate precincts, which can be done at a board authority, or open voting centers, which requires the governor to use his authority to, I guess, in a sense, grant us authority to do that. The numbers would be, obviously, the number of the traditional would be almost 2,000, I think it's 1,800 and some odd precincts. The consolidated and the current proposal would actually have the same numbers, because the consolidated proposal would have been the high schools in each jurisdiction plus the early voting centers in that jurisdiction would then all on election day become consolidated precincts. The tabled, the motion that PJ is just about to make is going to be that you'll have your early voting centers, whatever the number may be, and then on election day, you'll have your high schools and early voting centers all operating as early voting centers. So the numbers don't change. And the number in either of those proposals is a floor and not a ceiling. We would encourage, I believe the board would be encouraging the local boards to exceed that number if they can reasonably staff additional facilities. So it's a floor, no ceiling. But otherwise, the numbers would be the same. And I think I've stated that correctly. Does anybody want to tell me I'm incorrect on that? Okay. So, Mr. Hogan, I believe then that the chair is entertaining a motion to establish on election day high schools, or a number would be to establish a number of voting centers equivalent to the number of high schools and existing voting centers in early voting, as election day voting sites as voting centers. And that the board will send a request to the governor, asking him to exercise his authority to allow this to happen. Does that set out your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
I have a little bit of worry in one piece of that, BJ, and that's when I heard 40-some high schools in Baltimore City, and they have the hardest problem with judges. So I agree with everything in principle. I'm worried about that one jurisdiction I heard about. They have to have their, whatever, the 8 or 9 early voting sites plus 43 high schools or 44 high schools. That would put them at 50 locations, with Anne Arundel County would have 20. And I'm not sure, that's the only thing it's rolling in my brain. I don't know if you can speak to that.
I'm trying to look up some data right now. Reason I'm not positive, for instance, one of the gentlemen spoke, said Montgomery County had 35 high schools. Montgomery County has 25 high schools. I know that for a fact. Okay, I'm looking at Baltimore City Public School website right now. They have 25 high schools, not 44. Okay? So I think that addresses your concern. And then I was somewhat Kelly made a comment about, okay, well, what about a small, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kelly. He said, like, what about a small county? So I'm looking at the,
Well, I'm in a small county. We have 4 high schools.
okay.
And I think we have Calvert.
I mean, yeah, so you've got 4 high schools. Right now, Calvert has 14 precincts.
Right.
So how many early voting centers do you have?
We had 1. So with the high
So you'd
school,
be at 5
right.
voting centers. Let's take Caroline County, 8 precincts, probably 1 early voting center. I don't know how many high schools in Caroline, probably no more than 2. Can't imagine. And it kind of goes back to what I said the other day. I know it's not a perfect, but high schools generally they're population based. I mean, that's why you've got a lot more high schools in Prince George's County than you do in Caroline, obviously. And they have I don't mean to be redundant, they have the largest rooms, the most parking. They've got the power, as far as electrical power. They're ADA compliant. There's no doubt about that. We're talking about public high schools here. And any board of education, and I'll probably get in trouble now when I say this, any board of education around the state that doesn't assist us in this, shame on them.
You answered my question. Thank you. I'm on board.
Okay, a motion has been made, as stated. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. And all in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Bill, did you vote?
Yeah, I did. I voted aye.
Okay. I'll vote aye. It's 5-0. And so that's what we have. Yes.
Did that deal with the days of early voting too? Did that motion, or was it only both aspects, right?
Well, we could just leave early voting as it currently is in statute.
Okay, okay. So it would be like the 7 days of early voting, then you'd have a break, and then the high schools would be election day.
I actually want to defer to Nikki or Linda or Tracy or Donna, somebody on how you think it would be best to have early voting in conjunction with this.
So perhaps we start, if I could, ask Andrea to comment on the early voting days and what flexibility the board has to move those days. And then we can answer the administrative question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Can you hear me, Nikki? Can people hear me? Okay,
Yes.
good. All right. I just swapped my headset because it was hurting my ears. So the board has exercised authority pursuant to the governor's renewed June 19th order allowing agencies to suspend legal time requirements. Specifically, what that order says is the head of each unit of state or local government may, upon a finding that the suspension will not endanger the public health, welfare, or safety, and after notification to the governor, suspend the effect of any legal or procedural deadline, due date, time of default, time expiration, period of time, or other time of an act or event described within any state or local statute, rule, or regulation that it administers. The effect of this, I think, gives the board authority to suspend, as the order says, the time of an act or event described within the election law article. And so what I believe the board has the authority to do is to take that provision in section 10301.1 that articulates the date and the times at which early voting is authorized to happen. The board can suspend the effect of that statute, and then by regulation or by policy, it can promulgate in its place a different time period. I believe the board has that authority, and so it's not something that needs to be submitted to the governor as part of this recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Andrea, thank you. Clarification on my motion. What I think is my opinion. I think the early voting centers should be open from October 29th through November 3rd, because we're trying to ensure the maximum number of places also on election day. You know, we all want people to vote early. You know, we want them to vote by mail. We want them to vote early, but human nature is what it is. And to get to 362 voting centers on election day, we need to have the 282 plus the 80 on election day. So 80 of the early voting centers open the 29th through the 3rd. That's a couple less days, I guess, than normal, but I think under these circumstances and to help out the locals, you know, I'm willing to go with that.
The other advantage also, Mr. Chairman and PJ, is that it's continuous days. So the election boards would not have to shut down the early voting centers and then reopen them and move the equipment back. So it's a cost saving as well as the continuous period of time of voting. Because once people start voting, let them continue to vote till the end.
Well, we don't,
Great.
Clarification, yeah, you're right now, Mr. Fun. Clarification that I just got an email that Baltimore City does have, Senator Kagan sent this to me, 42 high schools.
Well, then the Baltimore City school system website is inaccurate because it says they have 45 elementary schools, 73 elementary/middle schools, 5 middle schools, 11 middle/high schools, and 25 high schools. Maybe that's the confusion. Maybe someone is counting the 11 middle, the combined middle and high schools.
Okay, because we're only saying high schools.
Only because they're the largest, for all the reasons I said. But I think we can also give the locals a little bit of flexibility on the schools. I mean, we want to make sure they're geographically dispersed. They're where every voter has access to them. That's what we want.
Another point of information or clarification here. I don't believe what goes to the governor, should it have the days of early voting, or is that within our power and we don't need that to go to the governor?
That's my assessment is that it doesn't require action by the governor. The board has the authority to set that on its own under the executive order issued by the governor and renewed in June.
But I would just like to be telling the governor this is what we're doing, so he can see the whole picture.
So I think this is Nikki. So your question for us on the administration side is the impact of that. So I recall one of you on Wednesday asked the question of technically, and is it possible to run early voting starting it before Election Day and running it through? And Shafiq answered that, yes, it's possible. There's work to do, but it could be done. So I'll refer you to that if the proposal is from the 29th through the 3rd consecutive days with all of the locations acting as vote centers when they're open. The challenge is that if Election Day is not a vote center model and it's a consolidated precinct model, running that through does have some technical implications. So if the governor did not make the change for Election Day, and so we would go from an early voting model through Monday and then switch over to an Election Day model on Tuesday. I think Shafiq is on, I'm going to put him on the spot if he is, that there might be some technical problems with that. I think, PJ, that was your question that I initially punted to Andrea and then answered the technical side. Shafiq, are you available to be a participant to speak?
I don't see Shafiq is on.
Yeah, I know he's watching, but I don't know if he's logged in.
Got it.
I don't know if there's anybody else technically on the phone that can answer that. Again, your motion doesn't address that, right? Your motion is continuous vote centers for those 6 days, including Election Day, no stopping. And Shafiq did answer that. My question was just if that's not accepted, there might be a technical issue.
I'm sorry, this is Shafiq. I am on. I had just gotten a call. So can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So PJ's question was about technically being able to accomplish vote centers from 10:29 through 11:03, which you did answer on Wednesday's call, as it could be done. It will require work, but it can be done. If it's early voting, if it's vote centers from 10:29 through 11:02, and then Election Day is a precinct-based voting, could that happen? Or are there technical difficulties that would prevent us from ending early voting on Monday and starting Election Day as Election Day precinct-based voting on Tuesday?
Yeah, yes, there are a number of technical challenges with that approach. For starters, between the normal, I guess, timeline with early voting as opposed to election day, there's a number of days that are allotted specifically to provide SBE time to prepare what is called a bulk update, where we have to update in election day, this will be thousands of poll books in preparation for election day. So there's at least a 2 to 3 day period that would be needed between early voting and election day to allow for that to take place. So with that proposal that's in place now, if early voting were to start on the 29th and go through the 2nd of November, we would not have the time necessary to update the poll books for election day.
Excuse me, I thought we were going to keep on election day that the additional high schools would also be voting centers. We're not going to precinct voting. We're going to continue them as election centers. I mean,
Right.
voting.
That's correct. That's what the motion is. But that is dependent on the governor approving that action. And so I just wanted it to be information available to you that if the governor does not approve that for election day and we go to precinct-based voting on election day, that running vote centers from 10/29 to 11/2 and then changing to precinct voting on 11/3 is a technical problem for us.
Okay, then I guess he needs to be aware of that if he does not approve it then for the timing, because the timing would be affected by that. But we're not requesting that election day on the 3rd would be precinct voting. That would continue as vote center election.
Yeah, that is the motion. That's correct.
Correct, and just to clarify, Malcolm, that's exactly right. That clarification needs to be provided that it would be vote centers on election day in order for this approach to be doable.
Well, we need that approach for technical reasons, and we need that approach, more importantly, for ease of voters, so they can go anywhere within their county and vote. I think those are two really good reasons why.
And I would point out as well that I believe that we would still have precinct level results because we have the ballot starts. Although you could go anywhere to vote.
I think that the motion that passed didn't have any timing issues associated with it. It was just a motion to implement a particular voting method and to send that to the governor. Then PJ brought up
Yeah, PJ did say the 29th to the 3rd.
Yeah, he brought that up afterwards, though.
I thought it was
we
part of
haven't voted on that. That's not a part of the original motion, I don't think.
I wrote it down. Okay. I wrote it down differently. Well, I'm speaking for PJ. PJ can speak for himself.
I mean, I'm happy to amend the motion and revote it. I was trying to give a little bit of help to the locals by slightly less days, but we're also running it straight through till November 3rd. I don't feel real strongly one way or another on the dates. Defer to my colleagues.
Just so I understand what you're discussing, this is just to provide information to the governor about what the board plans to do with the early voting time period in the event that the governor should approve or go along with the recommendation that the board is prepared to make. I don't think it is advisable to take the necessary steps to vote to change the schedule today, only to find out that the governor isn't in agreement and then have to change it back. I think it probably is fine to vote to include that information about what the state board intends to do, but not to actually do it unless and until the governor signs off on this.
It's fine with me.
All right. We've effectively, we've directed the staff to prepare a letter to the governor. Not that he doesn't already know it or will know it within the next hour or so. But prepare a letter to the governor formally making this request. And based on this motion. So we've approved what is going to be requested. Staff be preparing a letter. Either the administrator or I could sign the letter. And then it goes to the governor, and it may have other information in it, as was just noted. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes?
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything further that we need to address as to this topic, which is item number 4? No? Okay. Now my agenda says proposed regulations change. Is that just sort of a holdover from another piece of agenda? Because it doesn't have anything associated with it, no numbers.
Yes,
Tracy?
that we don't have any regs for today.
Okay, so then we
Thank
will
you.
not, that's struck from the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the approval of early voting election day polling place site changes. Given the motion that was just made, I don't know that I'm open to thoughts about whether or not we should go through the polling place site changes. I'm open to thoughts on that. Is it
Mr.
worth
Chair,
doing, or
My
Yeah.
feeling is we hold off we just table this item and see what response we get from the governor, because that's going to determine what we need to do on number 6.
anyone opposed to tabling the item number 6?
I would just point out that I believe under the plan that you're recommending to the governor, the early voting sites wouldn't be affected one way or the other by the governor's approval or disapproval, if I'm not mistaken. And to the extent there's a local board that has put in a proposed site change for an early voting center, I don't know if it's helpful for them to have that determination made now, but it strikes me that it wouldn't be affected by the governor's determination one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Are any of these early voting site changes?
I believe, this is Donna Duncan. I believe Charles County, is that correct? Tracy, are you available to speak to that?
Oh, I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My board has not made a decision on that because in Charles County, they have not determined how long they're going to be virtual. So if I have a signed agreement that states if approved only if the Charles County Public School is still on virtual learning. If they go back in person, then in the middle of it, in the middle of early voting or what have you, I cannot be there. And that's a problem we're going to have with having high schools, like they were talking about, that some of our, we don't know if they're closed through Election Day or closed all of them days. Some of them are open in September. So that's food for thought as well.
Just to speak to that, the high schools would only be added to the extent that they were not early voting sites for Election Day only, when all high schools, I believe, are closed in there.
Yeah, I thought there was all schools were closed on Election Day because they're used anyway.
All right, but I was trying to move to have a bigger area in my Waldorf area to the new high school there for adequate space. So that's why it's put on hold until maybe the next meeting, until they make a determination.
You mean you wanted to use that for an early voting center?
Correct.
Oh.
So until the superintendent make a decision, until I get a signed agreement, I don't feel comfortable with that being on the agenda right now.
When you're ready, we're ready.
Thank you.
So we'll strike that from the agenda. And
believe-
are there any early voting?
Yes, I believe Frederick County, Stuart Harvey, the election director.
Mr. Harvey?
What you have before you is actually a polling place merger of precincts 7-5 and 7-6. They're very tiny precincts, and 7-6 has exactly 3 registered voters there, and they are in the same congressional district. They are in different county council districts, but that's not relevant this year. The only thing that is determinative of the ballot style is the congressional district. They're both in the 8th congressional district, so we're simply asking that you merge those 3 voters from 7-6 into precinct 7-5. Voters is less than 100 in both of those precincts combined.
Stuart, I thought the 3 was a typo. You're really serious. There are only 3 voters in that precinct. Wow.
Okay. Anything further on Frederick County?
No, it's absolutely accurate. The way the census tract ran, it ran along a stream. If you look at the maps that I sent along, 5 and 7-6.
We're having a lot of difficulty hearing, or at least I'm having difficulty hearing Stuart, but
We all are. I think at this point he was answering a question that wasn't very to a resolution.
I would move that we only consider early voting at this time, and if we're going to do consolidations, we do them all at once.
Unfortunately, Nikki pointed out that we do not have our normal.
I had paused for a minute. Basically, we're just looking for approval by the state board of that merger.
He's here, we're here. Does anybody object to merging these precincts? Chair, I'll entertain a motion to
I'm in favor.
approve the precincts.
So moved.
Second? Second? Moved, seconded, all in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries. Harvey, your precincts are merged. Or whatever.
This is Donna
As we-
again.
Yeah, Donna.
Nikki pointed out to me in all this discussion, we do not have all the normal paperwork for approving an early voting site that we present to you all. So I'm not sure that we are in the position to present them to you today.
Okay, that's fine.
I move
Any
that
other?
we table the early voting and election day polling place site changes to the next meeting.
I'm sorry, what was the last?
That I
didn't hear
move
the end of it.
we move Item 6 on today's agenda, the approval of early voting and election day polling place site changes to the next meeting.
Oh, no, we're tabling. Want to table it to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And is there any objection to that? Okay.
Nope.
Item number 6, table. Okay, item number 7. I don't have my speaker list because one of my computers went out on me. But I believe Ms. Wilson is on the speaker list. Is she available? Rebecca? Anybody?
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you so much, Chairman Kogan and members of the board for allowing me to speak today. I want to discuss 3 bottlenecks that I'm worried about in the ballot request process for mail-in voting, and want to suggest or propose a few very simple solutions to them. And let's see. So the bottlenecks are that I'm worried about a lot of voters requesting to receive their ballots online and the local boards being deluged with requests. I believe Ms. Garland testified 2 meetings ago that there could be as many as 700,000 voters requesting to receive their ballots online. And I know you put some changes in the instructions, but voters rarely read instructions, or most readers rarely read instructions, in my experience as a graphic designer. And it would be far more effective probably to make a very simple change to the form, the ballot request form itself. And that would be to simply strike the section where the voter can request an online ballot from that form, and replace it with language that tells the voter that if they want to get their ballot online, they can go online and request it. So it'd be a very simple, just instead of what's in that section, you just say, go online and get your ballot if you want to receive it online. And I think that would be much more effective in cutting down the number of voters that would use that option. And that would cut down on the massive number of voters, of ballots that would need to be hand transcribed, which of course places election workers at high risk when they spend long periods of time working in close proximity in enclosed areas. So it would help prevent the spread of the virus. The other 2 things are that if voters request their ballots at the last minute, and I know the deadline's been moved back a week, and I think that will help, but may not be adequate. And if all the voters, if there's a massive number of voters requesting their ballot at the last minute, a lot of voters may be confused when they receive this mailing, because they may believe that their ballot is inside the mailing, because in the primary election, they were mailed a ballot, and they may not be following this. So I know you haven't seen the outer envelope, or I don't believe you've seen or voted on the outer envelope for this mailing, but I would suggest that there would be really bold, clear language that lets the voter know that this is a ballot request form and it needs to be returned immediately, so that they won't be swamping the local boards at the last minute with those requests, and then that the vendor who's supplying the ballots themselves also will not be swamped with last minute requests at the same time that they're fulfilling mail-in ballots for elections from all over the United States, because there are very few vendors that are supplying these mail-in ballots. And when we already experienced problems in the primary election, when there was not very many other states holding an election at the same time, and our ballots were getting mixed in with ballots from other states. So the more we can make sure that voters understand that they need to act quickly when they receive this mailing, the better. And my third concern is how quickly the local board's election will be able to process these requests once they receive them. And one thing that will really help is if they don't have to decipher voter handwriting. So if there was a way to have a barcode on what they receive that would have the voter ID number on it, it would probably make it much quicker for those local boards to process those requests. And I would suggest that the voter ID number be placed in a barcode on the mailing label, on the outer mailing label on the mailing, and that you consider a repositionable mailing label that could be, that the voter could pull off and put on the form inside, so that when the local board receives that form back, they could wand that in, they could scan the barcode and bring up the voter record. And those are my simple, humble suggestions for ways that it might be possible to expedite these bottlenecks in the process. We know that there's potential for the post.
Is everybody else getting audio?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We know there's a possibility that the mail may be slow, and NOAA also just released an estimate that this will be one of the most active hurricane seasons in history. So the more we can do to really, whatever we can to streamline the process of making sure that voters understand what's happening, they get their ballots back quickly, they get their requests in quickly, and that it's simple for the local boards to process those requests, I think the smoother things are going to go. So thank you for considering these suggestions.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And anyone have any questions? All right, Ms. Wilson, I want to thank you, and I want to apologize. I believe you were on our speakers list at the last meeting, and I overlooked you, and I apologize for that. So with that and no further comments, thank you for your presentation and the materials that you sent in. Next item on the agenda is old business. Does anyone have any old business?
Mr. Chairman, this is PJ. Just a question on its old business. The Mayo proposal about when they would be allowed or directed to start canvassing. Are we going to take that up today, or are we going to take that up at a future meeting?
I would suggest a future meeting.
Probably doesn't need to be decided today, but I just didn't want to let it.
Right. In Montgomery County sent us a document on that.
Right.
Requesting specifically as to them, and Mayo also incorporated it into their planning. And I guess I would look at it as that's probably not one of the things we have to take up today, and we can set for the next meeting, and obviously ask Mayo and if Montgomery County wants to address us on that issue. It's going to be another timing issue.
Right.
We're gonna, I guess in the back of the mind, maybe we want to know exactly how we're going to run the election before we start tinkering with, the date. Well,
that's logical.
Yeah, well, maybe. New business. Does anyone have any new business?
I'd just like to bring up one thing in new business. It's around the recruiting of judges, and I'm wondering, and I'm asking because I don't know, so I don't know if Nikki has the answer to this, or Linda, or Andrea, but I'm thinking about the number of people we have that are unemployed, and I didn't know currently if somebody who was unemployed worked, let's say, all of early voting, would that money that they earn then go against their unemployment and disqualify them? And if so, that might be something else we could ask the governor to look into, suspending that and not letting them apply that income towards unemployment to have a little bit larger base there. Just going to throw that out there.
So
I don't
Greg-
agree with that question, Bill, but I'm happy to look into it.
Yeah, we did flag that as a potential issue before, so we never got around to answering it. So I'll take Andrea up on his offer to research it.
Great. Thank you. I just thought it was another avenue to get more judges.
Absolutely. And a good idea.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
One other item that I don't think is related to how the election's going to operate in late October, early November, but the centralized vote by mail application processing center. Where does that issue stand?
Linda, Nikki?
Linda, do you want to provide an update on that?
We've contacted our sister agencies and requested their assistance, and they are looking into it and will be getting back to us shortly.
Okay.
I know we've been working the problem for several days now with other agencies. And so we will see.
Because I think that would take a huge burden off of the locals.
It would. Absolutely. Anything further? PJ?
No, sorry.
No, it's fine. Get into new business. Okay. Disclosure of campaign contributions in the last 36 hours?
None.
Okay. Scheduling next meeting. All right. So today we're on the 5th. No, we're on the 7th. I'm sorry. Anybody have any suggestions as to trying to put some time aside for next meeting?
I'm thinking we should at least block off a date next week.
Oh, absolutely.
Hopefully we'll have an answer back from the governor. Maybe Wednesday, the 12th.
I'm kind of inclined to think that myself. How about everybody else?
I can make myself available that day.
Wednesday is a.
Hi.
Can we make it Tuesday, the 11th? Because Wednesday is a little tied up for me.
Okay. How about Tuesday, the 11th?
I can put it on my
meeting-
calendar, but I can't promise. Because I
I'm
may
just
be
hoping we have
traveling.
I'm just hoping we have an answer from the governor by Tuesday. Hopefully
I see what you mean.
Hopefully his staff has been listening to this meeting and is drafting an answer right now.
I mean, realistically, if that letter doesn't go to the governor until Monday, I think Tuesday might be a little fast. I would think Thursday.
Is there any way the letter could go to the governor today?
No, I don't think so.
No. How about a week from today?
Well, that would put us on Wednesday, which we have an issue.
It's on
Today
Friday.
was on Friday, but I was thinking Thursday.
Thursday is the 13th.
Thursday.
Kelly, how are you on Thursday?
Thursday is not a good day. I could do Friday maybe at 2:00.
Our time or your time?
Your time,
Oh, okay.
East Coast time. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be traveling in the morning, but I should be back by the afternoon unless something comes up.
We won't even think about that.
I know.
Don't even put that thought in your mind.
I know. People have told me if your flight gets canceled, you don't get on another one. There just aren't that many flights.
I'm available Friday.
All right. I'm coming back to, it needs to be Tuesday or Wednesday. We can't put it off to the following week. So realistically, and we want to try and do it as quickly as possible once we have information. But I think it's got to be Tuesday or Wednesday. So who do we lose on Tuesday and who do we lose on Wednesday?
I'm a maybe on both of those days.
Okay, Kelly's maybe.
I'll make myself available either one.
I will make myself available either one.
Okay.
We're talking about 2 to 5?
Yeah.
Whatever time, yeah, probably, but you know, if you need to, we can.
Okay, I was supposed to be in a meeting with the superintendent of schools from 3 to 4, but somebody else can do that. I mean, it's a committee, so they don't need me. This is more important than that. I won't say it's more important, but it's just as important.
Thank you, of course.
You need a quorum, so I'll make it available.
So it's Wednesday at 2, is that right? Wednesday the 12th?
Yeah.
That would, okay, so Wednesday at 2, Wednesday the 12th at 1400 hours Eastern, Kelly.
Okay.
And hopefully this works out, you know, with your schedule.
I'll do my best.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, it's Linda. If we don't have an answer from if we do not have an answer from the governor by Tuesday afternoon, do you still want to have the meeting, or do you want to schedule another one, a contingency meeting for like Friday afternoon, the 14th?
Sounds good. I like that idea.
I do too. That's wise, I think. Thank you for your wisdom, Linda.
Thank you.
Well, yes, indeed. But Kelly isn't sure, and Bill, didn't you say you couldn't make it all on Friday?
No, I can do any of the days we've mentioned. I can make it work.
Everyone said they were available on Friday.
Okay, 1400 Friday.
In the afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, 1400 Friday. Eastern.
Okay.
All right, and with this matter scheduled, last item, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor of adjournment? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Done. Motion carries. I declare the meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, staff, and thank you,
Yeah.
everyone else.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, sir.
Thank you all.
And thank you back, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right, everybody take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Wear your mask when you go out.